Have you ever felt like you were drowning in your own family? Like every achievement you worked for was deliberately torn down by someone who should have been celebrating with you? If you're still watching, please hit that like button because what I'm about to share might save someone else from 14 years of hell. My name is Angel, and for 14 years, I was the designated joke in my family's twisted comedy show. Not by choice, but by design, specifically, the design of my Uncle Marcus. Santa Maria, California, 2011. Picture a sprawling Spanish-style house where my extended family gathered every Sunday for dinner. The aroma of my grandmother's tamales should have meant comfort, but for me, it meant another performance. Another night of being the family clown, desperately using humor to deflect the constant jabs, the undermining comments, the systematic destruction of my self-worth. The clown steps into the role of mood lightener to avoid something boiling over again. That was me, perfectly described by family psychology experts. Every time Uncle Marcus would start his routine of tearing me down, I'd crack a joke. Every time he'd dismiss my achievements, I'd make everyone laugh to change the subject. "Oh, Angel got a promotion?" Uncle Marcus would announce at dinner, his voice dripping with that special brand of condescension only narcissists perfect. Assistant manager at a retail store. Meanwhile, my Derek just made partner at his firm. But hey, we all peak at different levels, right? The room would go quiet. That uncomfortable silence where everyone knows something cruel just happened but no one wants to acknowledge it. That's when I'd jump in with a joke, a funny story, anything to break the tension. The mascot deflects the reality of her tragic circumstances and expresses her pain through comic relief. Uncle Marcus wasn't just any relative, he was the family's golden standard. A successful real estate developer who owned multiple properties across California, drove a different luxury car to each family event, and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of his success. He had this way of positioning himself as the family patriarch, even though he wasn't the eldest. Money talks, and his spoke volumes. But his treatment of me went beyond simple arrogance. It was targeted, calculated, designed to break me down. When I graduated from community college with honors, he told everyone I finally managed to finish something. When I started my first business, a small online consulting service, he laughed and called it Angel's little hobby in front of 40 family members at Thanksgiving. The pattern was always the same. I'd achieve something, anything, and Uncle Marcus would find a way to diminish it. Got a new car? Used cars are practical for people in your situation. Lost 30 pounds? Finally trying to look presentable? Started dating someone nice? They must not know the family yet. My parents, caught in the web of family dynamics, never stood up to him. My mother would give me sympathetic looks but say nothing. My father would change the subject. They were classic enablers, reinforcing the power of the narcissist by engaging in the manipulation of others in the family. The other relatives? They'd fallen into their assigned roles perfectly. My cousin Sarah was the golden child in Uncle Marcus's eyes, she could do no wrong. My brother David became the lost child, barely showing up to family events. And me? I was the mascot, the clown, the one who kept everyone laughing while dying inside. Despite their light-hearted exterior, on the inside mascots feel powerless and confused about what is going on in the family. That was my reality. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday gathering, every family birthday party, I'd show up with my armor of jokes and my painted smile, knowing I was walking into an emotional battlefield where I was always the target. The truly insidious part? Uncle Marcus was beloved by everyone else. To the outside world, he was generous, charming, successful. He donated to charities, always making sure everyone knew about it, helped family members with loans, which he'd hold over their heads forever, and threw lavish parties at his estate in Montecito. But with me, it was different. I was his chosen scapegoat, though I didn't understand why until much later. Looking back, I think he saw something in me that threatened him. Maybe it was my resilience. Maybe it was the fact that despite his constant attacks, I kept showing up, kept trying, kept achieving things even if they seemed small to him. What Uncle Marcus didn't know, what nobody knew, was that behind my role as the family clown, I was building something. Every night after those dinners, I'd go home and work on my real passion, digital security consulting. Not the little hobby, he mocked, but a sophisticated operation that helped companies protect themselves from cyber threats. I discovered I had a gift for what I called deflection expertise, the ability to redirect, reshape, and neutralize digital attacks. Ironic, considering I'd spent years deflecting emotional attacks at family dinners. But in the digital world, my skills were worth gold. Companies paid premium prices for someone who could think like an attacker and defend like a guardian. By 2015, 4 years into my torment, I was already making 6 figures annually. But I told no one. I drove the same old Honda Civic. I lived in the same small apartment. I wore the same clothes. Because I'd learned that in a narcissistic family system, don't tell the outside world, pretend everything is fine works both ways. I pretended everything was normal, hiding my success like others hide their pain. The money wasn't even the point initially. It was the knowledge that I was building something Uncle Marcus couldn't touch, couldn't diminish, couldn't destroy with his words. Every contract I signed, every client I helped, every dollar I earned was a small act of rebellion against the role he'd forced me into. But the emotional toll was mounting. After a lifetime of repressing their own pain, they are likely to suffer from chronic depression. I found myself having anxiety attacks before family gatherings. I'd sit in my car for 20 minutes, practicing my breathing exercises, preparing my jokes like armor for battle. The worst part was how it affected every area of my life. I struggled in relationships because I'd learned to hide my true self behind humor. I downplayed my achievements at work because I'd been conditioned to expect them to be mocked. I even caught myself undermining my own success, beating Uncle Marcus to the punch by dismissing my accomplishments before he could. This is what narcissistic abuse does. It doesn't just hurt in the moment, it rewires your brain, changes how you see yourself, makes you complicit in your own diminishment. Chronic emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional neglect cause the victim to be self-doubting. Narcs are skilled at flipping everything to blame the victim. By 2018, 7 years into this pattern, I was exhausted. My business was thriving, I'd incorporated, hired contractors, and was managing multiple 6-figure contracts. But my family still saw me as the joke, the underachiever, the one who couldn't quite measure up to Uncle Marcus's standards. The family dynamics had become so entrenched that even when I tried to share good news, it was immediately dismissed. I once mentioned landing a new client, carefully downplaying it as just a small project, and Uncle Marcus immediately launched into a story about his latest $1 million real estate deal. The rest of the family nodded along, impressed as always, while my news vanished like smoke. It wasn't just Uncle Marcus anymore. The entire family had been trained to see me through his lens. I was Angel the clown, Angel the underachiever, Angel who tried hard but never quite made it. Even relatives who joined the family through marriage quickly learned my role and played along. But every dog has its day, and mine was coming. What Uncle Marcus didn't realize was that while he was building his real estate empire on traditional foundations, I was building something in the digital realm that would eventually dwarf his achievements. By 2020, my company's valuation had crossed 7 figures, and I had offers from larger firms to buy me out. Still, I said nothing. I kept playing my role, showing up to dinners, deflecting his barbs with humor, being the family entertainment. Because I'd learned something important from all those years of observation: for the narcissist, everything is a matter of their narcissistic image. And I was about to use that knowledge to my advantage. The stage was set. The players were in position. And Uncle Marcus, in his arrogance and cruelty, had no idea that the family clown he'd created was about to have the last laugh. Behind the mask of the family clown, I was becoming something Uncle Marcus could never imagine, a master of digital deflection worth millions. Let me explain what deflection expertise really means in the cybersecurity world. While Uncle Marcus was buying buildings and land, tangible assets he could show off, I was protecting invisible kingdoms worth billions. Major corporations hired me to think like a hacker, find their vulnerabilities, and build systems that could deflect even the most sophisticated attacks. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years of deflecting Uncle Marcus's emotional attacks had trained me to think in patterns, to anticipate strikes, to redirect negative energy. In family dinners, I used humor. In cyberspace, I used code. Same skill, different application. By 2021, my client list read like a Fortune 500 directory, though all under strict NDAs. I developed a proprietary system that could predict and prevent data breaches with 97% accuracy. Tech giants were knocking on my door. Venture capitalists were offering funding. And through it all, I maintained my cover as the family disappointment. The numbers were staggering. My main contract alone was worth $1.8 million annually. Add in the consulting fees, the licensing agreements for my software, and the equity stakes I'd negotiated in 3 startups I'd protected from catastrophic breaches, and my net worth had quietly climbed to $4.5 million. But here's where it gets interesting. I started documenting everything. Not just my success, but Uncle Marcus's abuse. Every undermining comment, recorded on my phone. Every public humiliation, saved in a file I labeled evidence. Every family member who laughed along or stayed silent, catalogued and dated. Keep records of events, conversations, and interactions. Advice from therapists dealing with narcissistic abuse. I took it to heart. I had videos from family gatherings where Uncle Marcus's treatment of me was clearly visible. Text messages where he'd mock my little computer job to other relatives. Email chains where he'd deliberately exclude me from family business discussions because I wouldn't understand the real business world. The documentation served 2 purposes. First, it validated my reality. When you're being gaslit for years, having concrete evidence that it's really happening becomes crucial for your sanity. Second, I knew that someday, somehow, this evidence would matter. I also started researching narcissistic personality disorder obsessively. NPD is marked by enduring traits of grandiosity, fantasies of boundless power, and an insatiable desire for admiration. Uncle Marcus checked every box. The more I learned, the more his behavior made sense. He wasn't just mean, he was clinically disordered. Understanding the psychology helped me strategize. I learned that narcissists have specific triggers, predictable patterns, fatal weaknesses. A person with NPD needs to constantly feel like the most successful and powerful person in the room. If they feel as though someone else is outshining them, they can quickly become jealous. This knowledge became my secret weapon. I started planning something I called Operation Revelation, not revenge in the traditional sense, but a careful, systematic exposure of truth that would use Uncle Marcus's own narcissistic traits against him. Meanwhile, my professional reputation was soaring. I was invited to speak at cybersecurity conferences, always via encrypted video, never showing my face. I wrote articles for major tech publications under a pseudonym. I was even consulted by government agencies for national security matters. The contrast between my 2 lives was surreal. Monday through Friday, I was a respected expert whose opinion could swing million-dollar decisions. Sunday evenings, I was the family joke, deflecting Uncle Marcus's latest barbs about my sad little life. Still driving that old Honda, Angel? He'd say, not knowing I'd paid cash for a Tesla that I kept in a garage across town. Maybe if you'd focused on real business instead of playing with computers, you could afford something decent. I'd laugh, make a self-deprecating joke, and mentally add another video clip to my evidence folder. The secrecy was exhausting but necessary. Secrecy and denial. There may be a culture of secrecy and denial within the family, preventing open discussion. Our family was built on secrets, and mine was just one more. But unlike the toxic secrets that protected Uncle Marcus's ego, mine was a seed of truth waiting to bloom. I hired a lawyer in 2022, not to sue but to prepare. We discussed options for civil action regarding intentional infliction of emotional distress. California law was particularly favorable for cases involving systematic emotional abuse within families. The lawyer, a specialist in narcissistic abuse cases, was fascinated by my documentation. In 30 years of practice, she told me, I've never seen someone document their abuse so thoroughly while simultaneously building such a strong position of power. You're not a victim anymore, Angel. You're a survivor with options. Options. That word meant everything. For years, I'd felt trapped in my role, unable to escape the family dynamic without losing my entire support system. But now I had options. Financial independence. Legal recourse. And most importantly, the power to choose when and how to reveal the truth. I also started therapy, specifically with someone who specialized in narcissistic family systems. Therapy helps survivors of narcissistic abuse feel emotionally and psychologically safe. My therapist helped me understand that my humor wasn't just deflection, it was survival. Every joke was a small act of resistance, a way of maintaining some control in an uncontrollable situation. You've been playing a long game without even realizing it, she observed. Building your success in secret, documenting the abuse, maintaining your cover, these aren't the actions of a victim. They're the strategies of someone preparing for war. She was right. Without consciously planning it, I'd been preparing for a confrontation that felt increasingly inevitable. Uncle Marcus's behavior was escalating. As his real estate business faced challenges during the economic uncertainty of 2022 to 2023, his need to dominate and diminish me intensified. The family WhatsApp group became his new platform for humiliation. He'd share articles about millennials who can't afford homes and tag me. He'd post photos from his luxury vacations with captions like, "Success looks different for everyone, some of us travel the world, others travel to work." Each post was screenshot, saved, backed up in multiple locations. My evidence folder had grown to over 500 items. Videos, texts, emails, witness statements from family friends who'd noticed the dynamic but felt powerless to intervene. I also discovered something interesting in my research. Uncle Marcus's real estate empire wasn't as solid as it appeared. Public records showed multiple properties leveraged to the hilt. Business filings revealed partnerships dissolving, lawsuits pending. His latest development project was hemorrhaging money due to permit issues and construction delays. The king of the family was standing on shaky ground, and his increased cruelty toward me was likely projection attacking me to feel better about his own declining position. The goal of the narcissist is to maintain power and control. To do this they must divide and conquer. But his empire's cracks gave me an idea. What if his downfall wasn't just about exposing his treatment of me? What if it was about revealing the entire house of cards, the financial instability, the emotional abuse, the careful image management that hid a crumbling foundation? I hired a private investigator, perfectly legal in California for matters of family financial transparency. What they found was shocking. Uncle Marcus had been borrowing money from elderly family members, promising returns that never materialized. He'd convinced my grandmother to mortgage her paid-off house to invest in his latest project. He'd taken loans from cousins that were never documented properly. The family's golden boy was a fraud, and I had the receipts to prove it. By late 2023, my net worth had grown to $4.5 million through a combination of smart investments, successful contracts, and the sale of one of my software patents to a major tech company. I was financially bulletproof, legally prepared, and emotionally ready. But I waited. Because I knew Uncle Marcus better than he knew himself. I knew his patterns, his triggers, his desperate need to be the center of attention. And I knew that the perfect moment would come, a moment when his narcissistic nature would create the ideal stage for his own downfall. That moment was closer than either of us realized. April 15, 2024. My grandmother's 85th birthday celebration at Deerwood Castle in Jacksonville, Florida, the former Lamborghini headquarters turned premier event venue. Uncle Marcus had insisted on flying the entire family to Florida for a lavish celebration, desperate to maintain his image as the family's generous patriarch despite his mounting financial troubles. The venue was stunning, all marble and glass, with a view of the St. Johns River. Uncle Marcus had spared no expense, or at least created that illusion. What the family didn't know was that he'd pressured several relatives to contribute to make this happen, while taking all the credit for the planning and execution. 200 guests. Extended family, business associates, local politicians Uncle Marcus had cultivated over the years. A jazz band, premium catering, an open bar, the works. This was Uncle Marcus's stage, his chance to prove he was still the family's success story. I arrived in my usual humble style, same old Honda Civic, which I'd kept specifically for family events, wearing a simple dress from Target. Uncle Marcus was already holding court near the entrance, designer suit gleaming, Rolex catching the light as he gestured grandly while telling stories. "Angel," he called out loudly as I approached, ensuring everyone could hear. "You made it. Don't worry, the drinks are free tonight, my treat. I know things have been tight for you." The familiar burn of humiliation crept up my neck, but I smiled, laughed it off. "Thanks, Uncle Marcus. So generous of you." What happened next would become the catalyst for everything. The evening progressed with typical Uncle Marcus fanfare. He gave a lengthy speech about family, success, and the importance of lifting others up while somehow managing to mention his own achievements 17 times in 10 minutes. I counted. Then came the moment that changed everything. "Before we toast Mom," Uncle Marcus announced, commanding the room's attention, "I want to take a moment to recognize family members who've achieved special milestones this year." He went through a list: Cousin Sarah's engagement, Aunt Rosa's retirement, various accomplishments of different relatives. Then he paused, smiled that cruel smile I knew too well, and looked directly at me. "And let's not forget Angel," he said, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Who's still trying to make something of that little computer hobby. Hey, we can't all be successes, right? Someone has to be the cautionary tale. The room laughed. 200 people laughed at me. My own parents chuckled uncomfortably. My grandmother, whose birthday it was, looked confused but smiled along. But then something happened that Uncle Marcus didn't expect. A voice from the back of the room, "Excuse me, Mr. Reyes, but are you talking about Angel Martinez, the cybersecurity expert?" The room turned. A well-dressed man in his 50s was walking forward, looking incredulous. Uncle Marcus frowned. "Expert? I think you're confused. Angel plays with computers, but..." "Plays with computers?" The man laughed, but not kindly. "Angel Martinez is the reason my company didn't lose $50 million in a ransomware attack last year. They're literally one of the top deflection specialists in the country. We paid more for their consulting than I paid for my house." The room went silent. Uncle Marcus's face flushed. That's impossible," he stammered. "Angel works retail." "Retail?" Another voice, a woman near the bar. "Angel Martinez owns Aegis Digital Defense. They turned down our acquisition offer of $3.8 million just last month. I'm Jennifer Chen from Vertex Ventures. I flew here from San Francisco specifically hoping to convince them to reconsider." The silence was deafening. Uncle Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The family members were looking between us, confusion and dawning realization on their faces. This wasn't planned. I hadn't invited these people. But the universe, it seemed, had decided it was time for truth. "You're mistaken," Uncle Marcus said desperately. "Angel, tell them they're confused." Every eye in the room turned to me. 14 years of humiliation, of diminishment, of being forced into the role of family clown, it all crystallized in this moment. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the venue's AV system, a skill that came in handy, and pulled up a presentation I'd never planned to use this way. "Actually, Uncle Marcus," I said, my voice steady and clear, "they're not mistaken." The screen behind the DJ booth lit up with my company's logo, followed by slides showing major clients, with names redacted for confidentiality, awards, speaking engagements, and finally a bank statement showing an account balance of $4.5 million. "I've been running a successful cybersecurity firm for the past 8 years, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I protected Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and yes, Mr. Thompson's logistics firm from catastrophic breaches. I'm not playing with computers, Uncle Marcus. I'm protecting the digital infrastructure that runs our world." The room erupted in whispers. Family members were pulling out phones, Googling my company. The confirmed information was all their incorporation documents, client testimonials, industry articles praising our work. But I wasn't done. "You know what's interesting, Uncle Marcus?" I said, walking toward him. "For 14 years, you've systematically undermined every achievement I've ever had. You've mocked me, belittled me, turned me into the family joke. And I have it all documented." The screen changed. Video after video of Uncle Marcus's cruelty played in quick succession. The Thanksgiving where he called my business a pathetic fantasy. The Christmas where he gave everyone expensive gifts except me, handing me a self-help book about accepting your limitations. The family reunion where he'd actually made a PowerPoint presentation comparing family members' successes, with me at the bottom labeled Participation Award. The room was no longer whispering. People were gasping, some relatives covering their mouths in shock. "But here's the real kicker," I said, now standing directly in front of him. "While you were so busy putting me down to make yourself feel bigger, you didn't notice that your own empire was crumbling." New slides. Public records of his failed developments. The lawsuits. The leveraged properties. The loans from family members that were never repaid. "You borrowed $200,000 from Grandma by mortgaging her house for your Riverside project that failed," I said, looking at my grandmother, whose face had gone pale. "You took $50,000 from Cousin Miguel for an investment that doesn't exist. You've been robbing Peter to pay Paul, and using your treatment of me as a distraction from your own failures." Uncle Marcus's face had gone from red to white. "You can't, this is illegal, you hacked." "Public records," I interrupted. "All publicly available information that anyone could access if they bothered to look past your facade. The only difference is, I looked. Just like I documented every single time you tried to destroy my self-worth to build up your own." The venue had gone completely silent except for the distant sound of waves against the shore. 200 people stood frozen, watching the family dynamic they'd observed for years finally explode into the open. "You want to know what's really pathetic, Uncle Marcus?" I said, my voice now filled with 14 years of suppressed anger. "It's not my little computer hobby. It's a grown man so insecure that he needed to destroy his own niece's self-esteem to feel successful. It's someone so narcissistic that he couldn't stand the thought of anyone else succeeding, so he tried to ensure I never would." I turned to address the room, my family, the strangers who'd witnessed years of this dysfunction. I succeeded anyway. Not because of this family, but in spite of it. Every joke I told to deflect Uncle Marcus's cruelty, I was building something. Every time you all laughed along with his mockery, I was signing another contract. Every family dinner where I was the punchline, I was becoming someone you could never imagine because you only saw what he wanted you to see. My grandmother stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Angel, Mija, is this all true? The money he took?" I nodded. "I have all the documentation, Grandma. Every penny." The room erupted. Family members were shouting questions at Uncle Marcus, who was backing toward the exit. The business associates he'd invited were recording everything on their phones. His carefully constructed image was shattering in real time, broadcast to the social media accounts of everyone present. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Derek, Uncle Marcus's son, the one he'd always compared me to, the golden child of the golden child, stepped forward. "It's all true," Derek said quietly. "Everything Angel is saying. Dad's been using family money to stay afloat. He's been lying about his success for years. And the way he treats Angel. I've watched it my whole life and said nothing. I'm sorry, Angel. I'm so fucking sorry." That was it. The complete collapse of Uncle Marcus's world, triggered not by me but by his own son's confession. Uncle Marcus looked around the room wildly, searching for allies, for anyone who would take his side. But narcissists tend to have difficulties within their relationships because loved ones may not tolerate put-downs, contempt and carelessness. Often, people reach a breaking point and have to cut ties. Finding no support, he did what narcissists do when their false image is shattered, he ran. Literally. Pushed through the crowd and fled the venue, leaving his wife, his son, and 200 witnesses to his humiliation. The party dissolved into chaos. My grandmother had to be helped to a chair. Various family members were confronting each other about loans and investments. The vendors were asking who was paying for the event since Uncle Marcus had only put down a deposit. I stood in the center of it all, feeling empty. This wasn't how I'd imagined it would feel. There was no satisfaction in the destruction, no joy in the revelation. Just exhaustion and a strange sense of grief for the family we could have been if not for one man's pathological need for superiority. Jennifer Chen from Vertex Ventures approached me. That was intense. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. I'd been preparing for this moment for years, but I never expected it to happen like this. "For what it's worth," she said, "standing up to family abuse takes incredible courage." "And that acquisition offer?" "It just went up to $5 million. Anyone who can strategically dismantle a narcissist like that can handle anything the business world throws at them." I looked around at my shattered family, at the ruins of what had been my grandmother's birthday celebration, at the phone still recording everything. This was my breaking point. But as I would soon learn, it was also my breaking free. The weeks following the birthday disaster were surreal. The family was in complete chaos, taking sides, demanding answers, processing 14 years of witnessed abuse they'd normalized. But Uncle Marcus? He went into full narcissistic rage mode. The smear campaign started within 48 hours. A smear campaign is a calculated and deliberate attempt to damage an individual's reputation and credibility. He created a narrative where I was the villain who'd ambushed him, hacked his private information, and ruined our grandmother's birthday out of jealousy. He sent emails to every family member claiming I'd fabricated evidence, that the business people at the party were paid actors, that I was having a mental breakdown. He even suggested I drugged him to make him appear confused and defensive. The old me might have retreated into humor, deflecting his attacks with jokes. But that person died at Deerwood Castle. What emerged was someone who understood that narcissists don't stop until they're stopped. I met with my lawyer, Rebecca Harrison, at her office in San Francisco. She specialized in cases involving narcissistic abuse and had seen it all. He's following the playbook perfectly, she said, reviewing the new evidence. When narcissists are exposed, they always escalate. The smear campaign, the victim playing, the projection, it's textbook. But here's what he doesn't realize, he's making our case stronger. We developed a three-pronged strategy. Legal action: file a civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, for his post-birthday lies, and fraud, regarding the family money he'd taken under false pretenses. Financial exposure: work with a forensic accountant to trace every penny he'd taken from family members, then help them pursue recovery through legal channels. Public documentation: create a careful, factual record of everything that could be shared publicly without violating any laws, protecting other victims from his behavior. The goal isn't just to win, Rebecca explained. It's to create consequences so severe that he can never do this to anyone again. I spent May 2024 building my case. The forensic accountant we hired uncovered more than even I'd suspected. Uncle Marcus had taken nearly $800,000 from various family members over the past decade, always with promises of massive returns that never materialized. He'd forged documents, created fake investment portfolios, and used new loans to pay back old ones in a classic Ponzi scheme. But the emotional abuse documentation was what really built the case. California had recently strengthened laws around coercive control and emotional abuse in family settings. My 14 years of evidence showed a clear pattern of systematic psychological torture designed to break down my self-esteem for his narcissistic supply. The private investigator found something else interesting: 3 former business partners who'd sued Uncle Marcus for similar behavior in professional settings. One quote from a deposition stood out: "Marcus Reyes operates by destroying others to elevate himself. It's not business to him, it's a psychological need." Meanwhile, Uncle Marcus was spiraling. His wife, Aunt Patricia, had moved out after learning about the financial fraud. Derek had gone no contact with him. His business associates wanted nothing to do with him after the birthday footage went viral on TikTok. Yes, someone had posted it, and it had gained 3.2 million views with the caption, "Narcissist Uncle Gets Destroyed at Grandma's Birthday Party." He tried reaching out to me through various channels. First came the rage-filled voicemails: "You destroyed our family. You're nothing but a vindictive little brat who couldn't handle some friendly teasing." Then the manipulation: "Angel, we're family. This has all been blown out of proportion. Let's sit down and talk like adults." Finally, the threats: "If you don't drop this, I'll make sure you never work in tech again. I have connections you can't imagine." Every message was saved, transcribed, and added to the legal file. In June, I made a strategic decision. I created a website, truthaboutmarcusreys.com, not a vindictive rant site, but a carefully documented timeline of his behavior, including the birthday party video, already public; court documents from his previous lawsuits, public record; a timeline of loans from family members with documentation, with their permission; testimonials from other victims who came forward after the birthday incident. The site went live on June 15, 2024. Within a week, it had received 50,000 visits. Other family members started contributing their own stories and evidence. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with their own experiences of Uncle Marcus's manipulation and financial exploitation. The website served multiple purposes. It prevented him from controlling the narrative, validated other victims' experiences, and created pressure for accountability. But most importantly, it showed that I wasn't backing down. Uncle Marcus's response was predictable but devastating for him. He tried to sue me for defamation, but since everything on the site was either public record or documented truth, his lawyer dropped him after reviewing the evidence. He attempted to create his own website in response, but his rambling, accusatory content only made him look more unstable. By July, the family had completely turned against him. Even those who'd initially tried to stay neutral couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. My grandmother, devastated by the betrayal but finally understanding the truth, gave a deposition about the money he'd taken from her. The forensic accountant delivered their final report: Uncle Marcus was essentially bankrupt. His properties were leveraged beyond their value, his business accounts were empty, and he'd been living entirely on borrowed money and credit for the past 2 years. The image of success he'd projected was completely false. "This changes our strategy," Rebecca told me. "We can't get blood from a stone financially, but we can pursue criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse." Elder abuse. The words hit hard. Uncle Marcus hadn't just stolen from our grandmother, he'd exploited her trust and love for financial gain. In California, that's a felony. We filed the civil suit on July 20, 2024. The complaint was 127 pages of meticulously documented abuse, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The demand was for $2.4 million in damages, not because I needed the money, but because the number needed to reflect the severity of 14 years of systematic abuse. Simultaneously, the district attorney's office opened a criminal investigation into the elder abuse and fraud allegations. Uncle Marcus was formally served papers at the hotel where he'd been living since Aunt Patricia kicked him out. According to the process server, he threw the papers back and screamed, "This is all Angel's fault. That pathetic loser is trying to destroy me out of jealousy." But the evidence spoke louder than his denials. August brought depositions. Family member after family member testified about witnessing his treatment of me, about loans never repaid, about the toxic dynamic he'd created. Even those who'd laughed along with his jokes admitted they'd known it was wrong but felt powerless to intervene. My mother's deposition was particularly powerful. "I failed my child. I watched Marcus destroy Angel's self-esteem for years and did nothing because I was afraid of him. He controlled our entire family through fear and manipulation. Angel surviving and thriving despite that is a miracle." The deposition process also revealed something unexpected. 3 other family members, 2 cousins and an aunt admitted they'd also built successful careers while hiding them from Uncle Marcus for fear of becoming targets. The family's successful patriarch had actually suppressed the achievements of multiple family members to maintain his superiority. Uncle Marcus's deposition was a masterclass in narcissistic behavior. He denied everything, claimed conspiracy, suggested everyone was lying, and at one point actually said, "Even if I did say those things, which I didn't, Angel should be grateful. I made them stronger." Rebecca looked at me after his deposition and simply said, "He just handed us the case." September rolled around with settlement negotiations. Uncle Marcus's new lawyer, his third, as the previous 2 had quit, tried to lowball with a $50,000 offer and a mutual non-disclosure agreement. We countered with our original demand plus an additional $500,000 in punitive damages based on his behavior during the legal process, and absolutely no NDA. This story needed to be told. The criminal case was also progressing. The DA had enough evidence to file charges for elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. Uncle Marcus was arrested on September 15, 2024, at 6 a.m. His mugshot showed a man who'd aged a decade in 5 months. But I wasn't celebrating. This wasn't about destroying him, it was about stopping him. Healing from narcissistic parents is possible, and taking steps to do so will help you start on a journey towards self-empowerment. This was my healing, my empowerment, my reclaiming of the narrative he'd stolen from me for 14 years. The final piece of the revenge wasn't legal or financial, it was personal. I recorded a video, not for court but for myself and other survivors of narcissistic abuse. In it, I spoke directly to the camera, no jokes, no deflection, just truth. For 14 years, I was the family clown. I used humor to survive systematic emotional abuse from someone who should have protected and celebrated me. I'm done laughing it off. I'm done pretending it was okay. And I'm done letting narcissists control the narrative. To everyone watching who's trapped in a similar situation, document everything. Build your independence in secret if you have to. And when you're ready, stand up and speak your truth. They only have power if we give it to them. The video went viral on TikTok, reaching 18 million views in 2 weeks. The comments section became a support group for thousands sharing their own stories of narcissistic abuse. Uncle Marcus had wanted to be famous, well, he got his wish, just not how he'd imagined. October 1, 2024. The trial began. The courtroom was packed. Family members, journalists who'd been following the viral story, other survivors of narcissistic abuse, and curious observers filled every seat. Uncle Marcus sat at the defendant's table, still trying to project confidence, but the cracks were showing. Rebecca had prepared meticulously. Our evidence was organized into themed presentations: the pattern of abuse, the financial exploitation, the family dynamic, and the impact. Each section was supported by videos, documents, and witness testimony. The first week focused on establishing the pattern. 14 years of documented abuse was presented chronologically. The jury watched video after video of Uncle Marcus's jokes that weren't jokes, his public humiliations, his systematic campaign to destroy my self-worth. One video particularly resonated, Christmas 2019, where Uncle Marcus had given everyone elaborate gifts except me. On camera, he'd said, "Angel gets the gift of family presents. That should be enough for someone at their level." The jury visibly winced. Dr. Sarah Chan, an expert witness specializing in narcissistic abuse, testified about the psychological impact of such treatment. NPD profoundly influences an individual's self-perception, interpersonal relationships, and psychosocial well-being. The complex web of narcissistic traits poses significant challenges not only to those directly affected but also to the broader societal setting. She explained how systematic emotional abuse can be more damaging than physical abuse, how it rewires the victim's brain, creates complex PTSD, and leads to a lifetime of psychological challenges. Week 2 brought the financial evidence. The forensic accountant presented a clear picture of Uncle Marcus's fraud. Charts showed money flowing from family members to Uncle Marcus, then disappearing into failed ventures or personal expenses. The total amount exploited from family members had reached $1.2 million over 15 years. My grandmother's testimony was heartbreaking. At 85, she had to relive how her own son had manipulated her into mortgaging her home, promising he'd triple her investment. She'd believed him because family doesn't lie to family. She now faced the possibility of losing her home in her final years. Uncle Marcus's defense was essentially gaslighting the entire courtroom. His lawyer argued that these were family loans given freely, that the teasing was normal family dynamics, and that I was a disgruntled family member seeking attention and money. Then came the cross-examination of Uncle Marcus himself. Rebecca destroyed him methodically. She played his deposition where he denied saying things, then played videos of him saying exactly those things. She presented his own emails where he'd admitted to taking money but justified it as investing in the family's future. The moment that sealed his fate came when Rebecca asked, "Mr. Reyes, you claim Angel is lying about your treatment of them. Can you explain why 47 different family members have provided testimony supporting Angel's account?" His response was pure narcissistic rage. "They're all jealous of my success. This is a conspiracy led by Angel who couldn't stand that I was the family's success story." The family's success story? Rebecca pulled up his financial records. "Mr. Reyes, you're bankrupt. You've been living on borrowed money for 3 years. Meanwhile, Angel built a multimillion-dollar business while you mocked them. Who exactly is the success story here?" The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. Verdict: liable for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Liable for fraud. Liable for elder abuse. Total damages awarded, $3.2 million. But the civil trial was just the beginning. The criminal trial started 2 weeks later. The DA had built an airtight case for elder abuse and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Uncle Marcus had forged documents, created fake investment reports, and systematically targeted elderly family members who trusted him. His criminal defense was even weaker than his civil defense. He tried to claim diminished capacity due to stress, then pivoted to arguing that the family had misunderstood the nature of the investments. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, 8 years in state prison, with possibility of parole in 5. The day of his sentencing, November 15, 2024, Uncle Marcus gave a statement that perfectly encapsulated his narcissistic personality. "I'm the victim here. I tried to help my family achieve success, and this is how they repay me. Angel orchestrated this entire witch hunt out of jealousy. You're sending an innocent man to prison." The judge's response was measured but devastating. "Mr. Reyes, I've reviewed extensive evidence in this case. The only victim I see is the family you systematically exploited and abused for over a decade. Your complete lack of remorse only confirms the jury's decision." As they led Uncle Marcus away in handcuffs, he turned to look at me one last time. I expected rage, but what I saw was worse, complete incomprehension. Even now, he couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. The aftermath was swift and complete. His real estate licenses were revoked. The properties were liquidated to pay restitution to family members he'd defrauded. Aunt Patricia filed for divorce and received what little remained of their assets. Derek publicly denounced his father and started therapy to deal with his own trauma from growing up with a narcissistic parent. The family WhatsApp group, once Uncle Marcus's platform for humiliation, became a support network for healing. Family members shared resources about recovering from narcissistic abuse, apologized to each other for their complicity, and slowly began rebuilding relationships that had been poisoned for years. My grandmother's house was saved through a GoFundMe that raised $200,000 in 48 hours after the trial footage went viral. The comments were filled with other survivors of narcissistic abuse who wanted to help. But the real execution of revenge wasn't in the courtroom or the sentence, it was in the complete dismantling of Uncle Marcus's false image. The man who needed to be the most successful, the most important, the center of attention, was now known nationally as a fraud, an abuser, and a criminal. His name had become synonymous with narcissistic abuse. Psychology professors used his case as a teaching example. True crime podcasts dissected his behavior. The TikTok videos about the case had collectively reached over 100 million views. Uncle Marcus had become slang for a narcissistic family member. Comments like, "Is he pulling an Uncle Marcus?" appeared on videos about toxic family dynamics. I received thousands of messages from other survivors. They shared their stories, their struggles, their own Uncle Marcuses. Many said the case had given them courage to confront their own abusers or go no contact with toxic family members. One message particularly stood out, from a woman named Sarah in Ohio. "I'd been the family scapegoat for 20 years. Watching you stand up to your Uncle Marcus gave me the strength to finally document my abuse and file for a restraining order against my narcissistic mother. You didn't just get revenge for yourself, you showed all of us that we don't have to accept being someone else's emotional punching bag." The financial outcome was significant but almost beside the point. After legal fees and taxes, I received about $2 million from the civil judgment. I immediately put $500,000 into a fund for family members who'd been defrauded, established a $300,000 scholarship for survivors of narcissistic abuse, and donated $200,000 to organizations supporting emotional abuse victims. The remaining $1 million? I kept it as a reminder. Not of revenge, but of value. My value, which no one could ever again diminish with their words or actions. 3 months after the criminal sentencing, I did something that surprised everyone. I visited Uncle Marcus in prison. He looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, older, diminished. The man who'd loomed so large in my life for 14 years was just a broken narcissist facing the consequences of his actions. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you destroy me?" "I didn't destroy you, Uncle Marcus," I replied. "You destroyed yourself. I just stopped letting you destroy me too." "I made you stronger," he insisted, still clinging to his narrative. "No," I said firmly. "I made me stronger, despite you. The only thing you made was a mistake, thinking you could break someone who was always stronger than you realized." I left him there, in his cell with his delusions. But I left something behind too, the anger, the hurt, the need for his acknowledgement or apology. I didn't need anything from him anymore. The execution was complete. Not just of revenge, but of liberation. The complete destruction of Uncle Marcus sent shockwaves through every corner of his life. Like dominoes falling, each aspect of his carefully constructed image collapsed in spectacular fashion. His business associates abandoned him entirely. 3 major development deals he'd been working on dissolved within days of his arrest. Former partners came forward with their own stories of his manipulation and financial impropriety. A class action lawsuit was filed by investors in his failed Riverside project. The country club that had been his second home for 2 decades revoked his membership, citing conduct unbecoming of a member. The charity boards he'd sat on to boost his image quietly removed his name from all materials. The local business association deleted every mention of him from their website and returned donations he'd made, not wanting to be associated with his name. Social media became his ultimate nightmare. The hashtag Uncle Narcissus began trending, with thousands sharing their own stories of narcissistic family members. Memes were created from his courtroom footage. His mugshot became the image accompanying articles about narcissistic personality disorder. One particular TikTok series by a creator called it Narcissist Slayer broke down his behavior pattern by pattern, using the trial footage as educational content about recognizing narcissistic abuse. The series gained 40 million views and sparked a larger conversation about family dynamics and emotional abuse. But it was the family fallout that truly showed the extent of the damage he'd caused. Derek, his son, published a powerful essay in Medium titled "Growing Up Golden: The Hidden Abuse of Being a Narcissist's Favorite." He detailed how being the golden child had damaged him in different but equally profound ways. He wrote about the pressure to be perfect, the guilt of watching me be abused, the realization that his father's love was entirely conditional on his achievements. I was a prop in his show, Derek wrote. Angel was the scapegoat, but I was the trophy. Neither of us were seen as actual people. We were just supporting characters in the Marcus Reyes show. Aunt Patricia's divorce proceedings revealed even more disturbing patterns. She testified about years of coercive control, financial manipulation, and emotional abuse. She'd been isolated from her own family, made financially dependent, and gaslit into believing she was lucky to be married to such a successful man. He didn't hit me, she said in a recorded interview that went viral. But he didn't need to. He destroyed my self-worth so thoroughly that I thanked him for staying with someone as worthless as me. It took Angel's courage to make me realize I was in an abusive marriage. Other family members began connecting dots they'd missed for years. Cousin Maria realized why her wedding had been deliberately sabotaged by Uncle Marcus. She'd been getting too much attention. Uncle Robert understood why his business had suddenly lost a major client after a family dinner where he'd announced a promotion. Uncle Marcus had called the client and spread lies about him. The pattern was clear: anyone who threatened Uncle Marcus's position as the family's success story had been systematically undermined. My parents faced their own reckoning. The extended family's anger at their complicity in my abuse was intense. They were confronted at every family gathering about their failure to protect me. My mother entered therapy, genuinely trying to understand how she'd enabled such abuse. My father, however, doubled down on minimizing what had happened. It wasn't that bad, he said at one family dinner. Marcus was just competitive. The room exploded. Cousin Anna stood up and said, "If you still think systematic emotional abuse for 14 years wasn't that bad, then you're part of the problem." My father left the dinner and hasn't attended a family gathering since. The financial fallout continued to ripple outward. The forensic accounting had revealed that Uncle Marcus had been involved in multiple schemes beyond just family fraud. The IRS opened an investigation into tax evasion. The state licensing board found evidence of real estate fraud going back a decade. Federal investigators discovered he'd been using his business as a front for money laundering for other failing enterprises. Each new revelation brought fresh charges. By December 2024, Uncle Marcus faced an additional 15 years of potential prison time from various state and federal charges. His attempt to maintain his narcissistic image from prison was pathetic. He started a blog claiming to be a political prisoner and victim of a family conspiracy. He wrote long, rambling posts about his innocence, his achievements, and how the world had turned against a great man. The blog had 12 subscribers, mostly journalists monitoring it for bizarre quotes. Meanwhile, my life transformed in ways I'd never imagined. The acquisition offer from Vertex Ventures had increased to $6 million after the trial. My story had become legendary in Silicon Valley, the cybersecurity expert who'd used their skills to document and defeat their abuser. Companies wanted to work with someone who'd shown such strategic thinking and resilience. I accepted the offer but negotiated to maintain operational control of the company. The influx of capital allowed us to expand, hiring more specialists and taking on bigger contracts. Within 3 months, we'd doubled our revenue. But the professional success paled compared to the personal transformation. For the first time in my adult life, I could attend family gatherings without armor. No more defensive humor, no more deflecting jokes, no more shrinking myself to avoid becoming a target. I could simply exist as myself. The family dynamics had completely shifted. Without Uncle Marcus's toxic presence, people began showing their true selves. Talents and achievements that had been hidden for years came to light. Cousin Roberto revealed he was a successful artist who'd been hiding his exhibitions. Aunt Linda admitted she'd written 3 novels under a pseudonym. Uncle Tom had been secretly running a charity for homeless veterans. We'd all been dimming our lights to avoid triggering Uncle Marcus's narcissistic rage. Christmas 2024 was the first without Uncle Marcus in 15 years. The difference was palpable. Laughter was genuine, not nervous. Conversations were supportive, not competitive. People shared achievements and struggles without fear of judgment or mockery. My grandmother, freed from the financial strain and emotional manipulation, seemed to have gained years back. She pulled me aside during the dinner. "Mija," she said, tears in her eyes, "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have seen what he was doing." "You were a victim too, Grandma," I replied. "Narcissists are experts at manipulation. We all were under his spell in different ways." "You broke the spell," she said. "You saved this family." But I hadn't saved the family, we'd saved ourselves by finally confronting the truth we'd all been avoiding. The media attention continued into 2025. I was invited to speak at conferences about surviving narcissistic abuse. Publishers wanted me to write a book. Documentary filmmakers reached out about telling the story. I agreed to one documentary, with the condition that it focus not just on my story but on the broader issue of narcissistic abuse in families. The film, titled The Last Laugh, Surviving Narcissistic Abuse, premiered on Netflix in March 2025. It featured interviews with multiple survivors, psychologists, and even Derek, who bravely shared his perspective as the golden child. The documentary's impact was massive. It sparked conversations in millions of homes about family dynamics, emotional abuse, and the courage it takes to break free from toxic relationships. Support groups for narcissistic abuse survivors reported huge increases in membership. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the emails I received from other family clowns, people who'd been forced into the role of comic relief to survive emotional abuse. One man wrote, "I'm 45 years old and just realized I've been doing exactly what you did, using humor to deflect my brother's narcissistic abuse for 3 decades. Your story made me understand that I don't have to keep playing this role. I can write my own script." A woman shared, "My mother has treated me like you described for my entire life. I'm the family joke, the one who can't get it together, while she's the successful matriarch. I started documenting everything after seeing your story. I'm building my exit strategy. Thank you for showing me it's possible." These messages, thousands of them, were the real victory. Not the money, not the justice, not even the freedom from abuse. It was knowing that our story had given others permission to recognize their own abuse and find their own path to freedom. 1 year later. April 15, 2025. Exactly 1 year after the confrontation at Deerwood Castle. I stood in front of 500 people at the Moscone Center in San Francisco, delivering the keynote speech at the International Cybersecurity Conference. But this wasn't a technical presentation about digital threats and deflection strategies. This was about a different kind of security, emotional and psychological. "We talk a lot about firewalls and encryption in this industry," I began, looking out at the audience of tech professionals. "But the most important security system I ever built wasn't made of code. It was made of documentation, boundaries, and the courage to stop accepting abuse disguised as family dynamics." The speech wove together my two worlds, the technical expertise that had made me successful and the personal journey that had made me whole. I talked about how surviving narcissistic abuse had actually made me better at my job, teaching me to recognize patterns, anticipate attacks, and build robust defense systems. Narcissists and hackers aren't that different, I explained. They both exploit vulnerabilities. They both use social engineering. They both rely on their victims not recognizing the attack until it's too late. The difference is, we have entire industries dedicated to stopping hackers. But narcissistic abuse? We're told that's just family being family. The response was overwhelming. Tech leaders approached me afterward, sharing their own stories of family trauma and professional success despite personal struggles. The conference video went viral in both tech and psychology circles. My company, Aegis Digital Defense, had evolved beyond just cybersecurity. We'd launched a foundation providing free digital security services to domestic abuse survivors who needed to protect themselves from tech-savvy abusers. We'd developed apps that helped people document abuse safely and securely. We'd created resources for those trying to establish financial independence while trapped in abusive situations. The company was now valued at $15 million, with offices in San Francisco, New York, and Austin. But more importantly, we'd built a culture where employees didn't have to hide their struggles or pretend everything was perfect. We had on-site therapy, flexible work arrangements for those dealing with family issues, and a zero-tolerance policy for workplace bullying. My personal life had transformed as dramatically as my professional one. I'd finally entered a healthy relationship with Sam, a therapist I'd met at a conference about trauma-informed care. They understood my journey, respected my boundaries, and never once tried to minimize what I'd been through. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine affection, concepts that had seemed foreign after growing up in a narcissistic family system. "You know what I love about you?" Sam said one evening as we watched the sunset from our apartment balcony. "You don't use humor to hide anymore. When you laugh now, it's real." They were right. The compulsive need to deflect with jokes had faded. I could be serious, vulnerable, even sad without immediately reaching for a punchline to ease the discomfort. The family clown had finally retired. Family gatherings had evolved into something beautiful. Without Uncle Marcus's toxic presence, we'd discovered who we really were as a family. Monthly dinners became celebrations of each other's achievements, no matter how small. Support replaced competition. Love replaced manipulation. My relationship with my mother had slowly healed through therapy and honest conversations. She'd done the work to understand her enabling behavior and made genuine amends. We'd never had the mother-daughter relationship I'd dreamed of as a child, but we'd built something real and honest from the wreckage. My father and I remained estranged. He'd chosen to maintain that Uncle Marcus was misunderstood and that I'd overreacted. Some relationships, I learned, aren't meant to be salvaged. And that's okay. Derek and I had become unexpected allies. We spoke regularly, supporting each other through the unique trauma of being opposite sides of the same narcissistic abuse coin. He'd started his own support group for golden children recovering from narcissistic parents, helping others understand that being the favorite was its own form of abuse. We were both props in his show, Derek said during one of our coffee meetings. You were the villain, I was the hero, but neither of us were allowed to be human. Uncle Marcus, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale. His prison blog had been shut down after he'd used it to harass witnesses. His appeals had been denied. His attempts to maintain his narcissistic supply from prison through manipulating other inmates had resulted in solitary confinement. He'd sent me one last letter, which I'd read with my therapist present. Angel, I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything I built, taken everything I had, turned everyone against me. But I want you to know, I made you who you are. Your success is because I pushed you. You should be thanking me. Even from prison, even after losing everything, he couldn't accept responsibility. He couldn't see me as anything other than an extension of himself, a supporting character in his story. I didn't respond. He wasn't worth the postage. The scholarship fund I'd established had helped 12 survivors of narcissistic abuse get therapy and education. One recipient, Maya, had escaped a narcissistic husband and was now in law school, planning to specialize in helping abuse survivors navigate the legal system. You showed me that we don't have to stay victims, she wrote in a thank you letter. We can transform our pain into power, our trauma into triumph. The documentary about our story had won 3 awards and been translated into 15 languages. I received messages from people in Japan, Brazil, Germany, India, all sharing how the story had helped them recognize and address narcissistic abuse in their own families. But perhaps the most meaningful development was the creation of the Angel Protocol, a standardized method for documenting emotional abuse that was being adopted by therapists and lawyers nationwide. It combined technical documentation strategies with psychological insights, creating evidence trails that could stand up in court. Keep records of events, conversations, and interactions had evolved from survival strategy to systematic methodology that was helping thousands of abuse survivors build their cases and reclaim their lives. I also started teaching. Once a month, I ran free workshops for survivors of narcissistic abuse, teaching them practical strategies for documentation, boundary setting, and safe exit planning. The workshops filled up within hours of being announced. One attendee, an elderly man named Robert, approached me after a workshop. I'm 72 years old, he said, voice shaking. My son has been treating me exactly like your uncle treated you for 20 years. I thought I was too old to fight back, too tired to change anything. But if you could stand up after 14 years, maybe I can too. 3 months later, Robert sent me an email. He'd gone no contact with his son, moved to a senior community where he felt safe, and started therapy. I'm finally living, he wrote. At 72, I'm finally free. These stories, hundreds of them, were the real measure of success. Not the millions in the bank, not the professional accolades, not even the justice served to Uncle Marcus. It was the ripple effect of one person standing up and saying no more. The speaking engagements continued. Harvard Business School invited me to lecture about toxic leadership and organizational dynamics. The American Psychological Association featured our case in their annual conference on personality disorders. Even law enforcement agencies reached out, wanting to understand how to better support victims of emotional abuse. Each platform was an opportunity to shine light on the insidious nature of narcissistic abuse, to validate victims' experiences, and to provide practical tools for escape and recovery. But I was careful to maintain balance. success couldn't become another form of armor. I took vacations, pursued hobbies that had nothing to do with work or advocacy, built friendships based on genuine connection rather than shared trauma. I learned to paint terribly at first, but with joy. I joined a hiking group that explored the California coastline. I adopted a rescue dog named Phoenix. Yes, the symbolism wasn't lost on me, who cared nothing about my professional success but everything about belly rubs and tennis balls. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility rather than dread. The girl who'd been the family joke had become a voice for the voiceless. The deflection expertise that had started as a survival mechanism had evolved into a superpower that protected others. During a recent family dinner, my cousin Anna raised a toast to Angel, who showed us that the only joke was thinking we had to accept being treated as less than we are. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt the last piece of the old me, the scared, humiliated family clown, finally laid down her burden and rest. In her place stood someone who'd learned the most important lesson of all. We don't have to accept the roles narcissists assign us. We can write our own stories, define our own worth, and create our own happy endings. And sometimes, just sometimes, the last laugh really is the best revenge. 5 years later. April 15, 2029. I stood once again at Deerwood Castle, but this time, the celebration was mine. My wedding to Sam, surrounded by chosen family and blood family who'd earned their place through growth and genuine love. The venue that had witnessed my destruction had been transformed into a symbol of my resurrection. Where Uncle Marcus had tried to humiliate me, I now celebrated love. Where family had once laughed at me, they now laughed with me. Derek served as one of my groomspeople, a testament to how far we'd both come. My grandmother, now 90 but still sharp, gave a blessing that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Angel taught us that angels aren't just heavenly beings, she said. Sometimes they're warriors who fight through hell to bring their family back to the light. Uncle Marcus was notably absent, of course. Still in prison, still maintaining his innocence, still writing letters no one read. His name had become a footnote in our family's story, a cautionary chapter we'd learned from and moved past. My company had grown to a $50 million valuation. The Angel Protocol had been adopted internationally. The scholarship fund had helped over 100 survivors. The ripple effects of standing up to one narcissist had created waves of change I'd never imagined. But standing there, exchanging vows with Sam, surrounded by people who truly saw and valued me, I realized the greatest victory wasn't in what I'd achieved, it was in who I'd become. The scared girl using humor as a shield was gone. The family clown had taken her final bow. In her place stood someone who could be vulnerable without fear, successful without apology, and happy without qualification. As we danced at the reception, Sam whispered in my ear, "You know what the best part of your story is?" "What?" I asked, swaying to the music in the same ballroom where everything had fallen apart 5 years ago. "It's not the revenge or the success or even the justice," Sam said. "It's that you turned your pain into purpose. You didn't just survive, you made sure others could too." They were right. The Angel Foundation had just announced its biggest initiative yet, a nationwide network of safe houses for people escaping narcissistic abuse, funded by the continuing success of my company and donations from thousands who'd been inspired by our story. The viral videos had evolved into educational content. Schools were using our story to teach about emotional abuse. Therapists were using the documentation techniques. Lawyers were citing our case as precedent. What had started as one family's dysfunction had become a catalyst for societal change. During the reception, I was approached by a young woman I didn't recognize. "You don't know me," she said, "but you saved my life. I saw your story when I was planning to, when I thought I had no way out. My narcissistic mother had convinced me I was worthless. Your courage gave me courage. I'm in medical school now. I'm going to be a psychiatrist specializing in personality disorders." We hugged, both crying, in the middle of the dance floor. These moments were worth more than any amount of money or professional success. The reception was filled with survivors. My support group members, scholarship recipients, people who'd reached out over the years. It wasn't just my wedding, it was a celebration of all of us who'd refused to stay broken. Derek gave a speech that brought the house down. 5 years ago, in this very room, I watched my father destroy himself trying to destroy Angel. But Angel did something I'd never seen anyone do, they refused to be destroyed. They documented, planned, and executed the most beautiful takedown of a narcissist I've ever witnessed. But more importantly, they showed me that being the golden child was just another form of abuse. Angel didn't just free themselves, they freed all of us from the roles we'd been forced to play. Even Aunt Patricia attended, now remarried to a kind man who treated her with the respect she'd never received from Uncle Marcus. She'd become an advocate for women in emotionally abusive marriages, using her story to help others recognize the signs. Marcus tried to break all of us in different ways, she said during her toast. But Angel showed us we were never broken, we were just bent. And bent things can be straightened. As the night progressed, I found myself on the balcony, looking out at the same view where everything had changed 5 years ago. My grandmother joined me, moving slowly but determinedly. "Mija," she said, taking my hand, "I have something to tell you." The family took a vote. "We're establishing the Angel Reyes Memorial Fund not because you're gone, but because the old angel, the one who suffered in silence, is gone. The fund will provide free therapy for any family member dealing with trauma. Your uncle's abuse affected all of us, and we want to heal properly." I was speechless. The family that had once enabled abuse was now actively working to heal from it. "There's more," she continued. "We're selling Marcus's old house, the one we got in the settlement. The proceeds will go entirely to your foundation. We want something good to come from all that pain." The house was worth $2.8 million. It would fund safe houses for dozens of abuse survivors. As midnight approached, Sam and I cut the cake, a deliberately ostentatious 5-tier creation that Uncle Marcus would have mocked as trying too hard. But that was the point. I was done dimming my light to avoid triggering someone else's insecurity. My phone buzzed with a notification. The TikTok video of Derek's speech had already gained 2 million views in 3 hours. The comments were flooding in: more survivors, more stories, more people finding strength in our story. One comment stood out: "My narcissist dad is in prison too. Seeing you thrive gives me hope that I can heal. The family clown is learning to stop performing." Before leaving for our honeymoon, I had one last thing to do. I'd written a letter to Uncle Marcus, not to send, but to burn. A final purging of the hold he'd had on my life. "Marcus, you were right about one thing: you did make me who I am. But not how you think. Your cruelty taught me empathy. Your lies taught me truth. Your abuse taught me strength. Every attempt to break me became a lesson in becoming unbreakable. You wanted to be the most important person in the room. Congratulations, for 14 years, you were the most important person in my therapy sessions. But those sessions taught me that you were never as powerful as you seemed. You were just a broken man breaking others to feel whole. I don't forgive you. Some things are unforgivable. But I release you. You have no more power over me. No more space in my head. No more influence on my life. You wanted me to thank you? Fine. Thank you for showing me exactly who I never want to be. Thank you for teaching me that family isn't blood, it's choice. Thank you for being such a clear example of what narcissistic abuse looks like, that I could help thousands of others recognize it. But mostly, thank you for underestimating me. Because while you were busy mocking my little computer hobby, I was building an empire. While you were calling me the family failure, I was succeeding beyond your wildest dreams. While you were trying to break me, I was becoming unbreakable. The family clown got the last laugh after all. I win. Angel. I burned the letter in a small ceremony with Sam, watching the smoke carry away the last vestiges of Uncle Marcus's hold on my life. The final update. As I write this, it's 2030. A full decade since the beginning of the end of Uncle Marcus's reign of terror. His parole was denied. Multiple additional charges have extended his sentence. At 73, he'll likely die in prison, still maintaining his innocence, still blaming everyone but himself. He's become a case study in narcissistic personality disorder, his complete inability to accept responsibility fascinating to psychologists worldwide. My company sold for $82 million last month. I'm using the proceeds to expand the foundation globally. We're opening safe houses in 12 countries. The Angel Protocol has been adopted by the UN as a standard for documenting emotional abuse. The family has healed beyond what any of us thought possible. We have boundaries now. We have honest conversations. We call out toxic behavior immediately instead of enabling it. We're not perfect, but we're real. I still get messages daily from survivors. Each one reminds me why I shared this story. A teenager in Japan who recognized their parents' narcissistic abuse. A grandmother in Ireland who finally understood why her son treated her so cruelly. A man in Brazil who used the angel protocol to document his wife's emotional abuse and gain custody of his children. The ripples continue expanding. Sometimes I think about the girl who sat in her car before family dinners, preparing jokes like armor, practicing breathing exercises to survive another night of humiliation. I wish I could tell her, it gets better. It gets so much better. The pain you're enduring is preparing you for a purpose you can't imagine. The documentation you're hiding will become evidence that changes lives. The success you're building in secret will dwarf anything your abuser achieves. But mostly, I'd tell her this: you don't have to be the family clown. You don't have to deflect with humor. You don't have to shrink yourself to avoid triggering someone else's rage. You are worthy of love, respect, and celebration exactly as you are. To everyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, document everything. Build your independence. Find your support system. Plan your escape. And when you're ready, when you're safe, stand up and speak your truth. The narcissists in our lives count on our silence, our shame, our fear of disrupting the family dynamic. They depend on us accepting the roles they've assigned us. But we don't have to accept those roles. We can write our own stories. And sometimes, if we're patient, if we're strategic, if we refuse to be broken, we get to watch their carefully constructed kingdoms crumble while we build something real from the ruins they created. The family clown doesn't perform anymore. The joke's over. The laughter now is real, born from joy instead of pain, connection instead of deflection. And Uncle Marcus? He's exactly where he belongs, in a cell with his delusions, while the family he tried to control thrives in his absence. The last laugh wasn't just mine. It belongs to every survivor who refused to stay silent, every family member who chose healing over enabling, every person who looked at our story and found the strength to write their own. To the narcissists still out there, still believing they're untouchable, still destroying lives for their own ego supply, remember this: your victims are documenting. They're planning. They're building. And one day, when you least expect it, the family clown will stop laughing, the scapegoat will stop accepting blame, the golden child will see through your manipulation, and your entire house of cards will collapse. And we'll all be there to witness it, not with cruelty but with relief. Because every narcissist who falls is a family that can finally heal. This is Angel Reyes Martinez, former family clown, current CEO, permanent survivor, signing off. The show's over. The joke's been told. The last laugh has been had. And it was worth every second of those 14 years of pain to get here. Remember, you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You are not required to accept emotional abuse to maintain family harmony. You are not responsible for managing someone else's ego at the expense of your own well-being. Document. Build. Plan. And when you're ready, rise. The last laugh is waiting for you.